This is, after all, one of BMW's most important and influential motorcycles of all time, and Mr. Editor Lance is keen on these retrospective reviews for good reason. Certain bikes deserve some of their history painted on the walls of common tread, and maybe a bit of flowery prose about how much we should care about them. If you're thinking the motorcycling world doesn't need another history of how the R80GS created the ADV category, you're probably right, and for that reason, I won't try to spell out every last detail. Think of this as a palate cleanser before we get a taste of what it's like to ride a 40-year-old innovation. As with any chin-stroking gaze into yesteryear, it's crucial to understand at least the context of the times. As with many manufacturers, BMW in the late 1970s was a different company than the one we know today. The wide array of models provided by many motorcycle brands these days was not necessarily the norm. And if there was one thing BMW had yet to conquer, it was off-road terrain, or Gelande to some. The products rolling out of the Motorrad division of BMW were pretty thoroughly designed for use on the road or street. That's Strasse in German, and frankly that part of the business wasn't exactly whistling along, with Japanese manufacturers fully in stride providing fast and affordable street bikes. Not to mention the fast and affordable dirt bikes from Japan and elsewhere, which all but convinced companies like BMW from even dipping a toe in the mud. BMW Motorrad was in sink or swim territory, with corporate management telling the new boss of the two-wheeled division, Karl Gerlinger, to succeed or be sold. And what with all of the competition, there weren't a lot of good options off the roads or on them. An R&D engineer named Laszlo Perez had an idea, though based on the strange crossbreeding of his work at BMW and a love of enduro riding. His Bavarian basement build was a bizarre mix of off-road tires and suspension on an otherwise streetish chassis, and a typical for the time 800cc boxer engine. Perez's bosses released him of other duties for 3 months to work on the prototype, and 18 months later the machine made its world debut. Part off-road, part street or Gelande or Strasse. In September of 1980, BMW invited motorcycle journalists from around the world to Avignon in the south of France to try the new R80GS. It could have been the dying gasp of BMW motorcycles, and some motorcycle experts of the day thought it might be. The bike was for sale for $4,800 in 1981, just north of $15,000 in 2022 bucks. And at least a few people asked the rhetorical question of what anyone was going to do with a 400-something pound dual sport that cost that kind of money. In the mindset of that era, it wasn't a bad question. Of course, it's easy to see now that it worked. The GS as a competition machine raised eyebrows and finished well all over Europe, and was soon crowned king of the Paris-Dakar rally. More importantly, the bike fit into the company plan and succeeded on showroom floors enough to keep BMW Motorrad chugging along. Incidentally, Karl Gerlinger gave the green light to the K100 as well, a liquid-cooled and inline engine that would lead to decades of K-bike evolution. Before submitting a review of this Hall of Fame motorcycle, it's fair to note that my dear old dad's GS you see in these photos isn't exactly in showroom condition. There are the Jessie bags, fog lights, heated grips and Corbin seat, plus more than 100,000 miles of tinkering, fixes and wear that the bike has accumulated over the years. Then the crown jewel, an 11-gallon fuel tank from a Turbis, which luckily doesn't affect the ride much unless it's full. The experience of riding it, like any first-generation GS, offers a peek into the past and what was the future. The riding position is upright and comfortable, but tall and commanding, just swinging a leg over. It's reminiscent of plenty of late-model tall rounder machines, Yamaha Tracers, Triumph Tigers, and of course, there's an obvious reason for that. High foot pegs are the only real oddity when comparing this first-general GS to any number of modern bikes. There wasn't any way to know it in 1980, but it's particularly interesting in the context of the OG GS that this half-and-half posture would come to be almost the norm. Starting the engine and dropping the bike into gear is to go from 1980s future to 1980s past. For anyone who has ridden a BMW twin built between 1960 and 1975, that's the feeling, a calm and slow idle with plenty of noise from the valves and intake when it revs. The transmission is a little clunky, and if a rider isn't used to it, there's a learning curve to knowing when a gear is engaged and when the tranny is in no man's land. Also, once you get going, don't expect that front brake to work very well. Discs were still kind of new people, provided you're deliberate with your shifting and don't expect vicious acceleration or deceleration. An old GS is a delight to ride, especially buzzing along the rural Vermont roads surrounding this bike's nest, where twisty ribbons of pavement with 50 miles per hour speed limits dictate an ideal pace. The chassis isn't as stable or as agile as a modern bike, but it's balanced and fun. It's easy and pleasant to settle into the top gear of the 5-speed gearbox and let the 45-ish horsepower drone along, peeling over from side to side as tall grass and wooded hills whip past. It'll go 80 all day, with a fair amount of applause from the valve train.